everyone, I'm the Book Guy, and welcome back to my read-through of the Discworld series. This is quite literally one of the greatest fantasy series of all time, and one of the best comedy series. I'm so excited to be back going through another book. Today we're up to book 6, Wyrd Sisters, the second book in the Witches series. Now, before we begin, let me just explain the rules for this video series. Reminder that rule number 1, you can watch these videos in any order because Discworld is very episodic. Second, it is spoiler-free. We're not going to tell you any major plot points. Although, number 3, this is going to be like a movie trailer, which will tell you a couple of introduction things to help entice you to read it. Sound good? All right, and just before we begin, if you'll indulge me, you may notice that today's video is in slightly better quality, and that's because I've got a new camera. Can you believe I have been filming YouTube content for 2.5 years off this phone? But I finally got a professional camera, and I'm feeling much more professional, and it's a good feeling. Let me also just point out something too. I can now zoom in. Eh? Hey, how's that? Right? That's not an editing thing. I'm just actually doing that on my phone. It's so good. Look, hey, wait, go out. What? It's so good. Okay, I'll put that back and we'll get started. Hang on. All right, thank you for indulging me. I feel very excited to have a good toy. All right, let's begin. So this is the 6th Discworld book overall. It is the second Witches book. The first one was Equal Rights, and this time Granny Weatherwax is back. Now, this is a very different book because in Equal Rights, Granny was taking on an apprentice who wanted to be the first wizard on the Discworld, and Granny was very much like, no, you need to be a witch. But this time, this book is about a coven of witches. In the same classic folklore trope of the maiden, the mother, and the crone, we have Granny Weatherwax back as the crone. We have Nanny Og, the mother of a small army of the Og clan, and Magrat, who is the maiden, the young innocent one. Although just on that note, it blew my mind. See, I've read the Discworld series before, and I did them all in physical form. Now that I'm going through it again for this video, I'm doing a lot of them by audiobook. As a personal quirk, I like to redo a series in a different format and get a new experience out of it. But did you know that apparently Magrat is pronounced Magrat? Like M-grat? Yeah, what do words even mean anymore? Moving on, I think as well that the Witches books are terribly underrated. I mean, if people talk about how much they love Discworld, and you do find Discworld fans out in the wild, normally they talk about the City Watch books, or the Death novels, or maybe the Post Office books, you know, if they're really out there. No one really mentions the Witches as a favorite, and I think that's a terrible shame, because the Witches books, they're all about intertextual references. They draw on classic folklore, old tales, familiar tales from the olden days. And in many ways, they're like the Rincewind books in that they are a satire retelling of these old tropes. But unlike Rincewind, those Rincewind books, they often play up the satire, make fun of them and mock those old stories and show how silly they are, where the Witches books are much more sincere. They genuinely appreciate the stories that they're mimicking, and it's a celebration of those types of stories, even as they're being satirized? I don't care. So Wyrd Sisters is actually a retelling of many Shakespearean plays. It actually combines 4 different elements of plays and mashes them all together. But the big flip on this story is at this time, the witches are actually very helpful. Where in Shakespearean stories, the witches are always menacing and they're causing trouble. This time, they're the good guys. So what's this story actually about? Well, in the country of Lecrae, King Verence has just been murdered by his archduke at the strong suggestions of the Duke's ambitious wife. However, before the Duke can finish off the king's son and claim the crown in full, the boy is saved by a coven of 3 witches. The witches decide to hide this boy with a troupe of traveling actors, and they trust that one day destiny will make it right and bring back the rightful heir to the throne to reclaim his kingdom. So in this story, as I said, the meddling witches are now the heroes, and they are trying to steer the country back on course from within the shadows, acting without anyone even being aware of their presence. Now, let me just remind you of the order of the witches books. The first one is Equal Rights, then we have today's Wyrd Sisters, followed by Witches Abroad, Lords and Ladies, Masquerade, and Carpe Jugulum. And all of them continue the theme that gets established in Wyrd Sisters, which is retelling older classic stories in fun, satirical ways. So what are the references we have in Wyrd Sisters? Well, the first most obvious one will probably be Macbeth, in that there are witches, and there's a king who's been slain and someone who needs to come back and reclaim the throne. Very Macbeth-type story. But there's several other stories combined as well. We have the Ghost King who features on the cover. That's straight out of Hamlet, with the ghost of the king telling Hamlet to avenge him and reclaim the throne. We also have a play within a play, which is from the Shakespearean play As You Like It. It's one of the more obscure things, but the whole play within a play concept was groundbreaking. Like, what a plot twist back in the day. That was the original Inception. And we also have A King Who Goes Mad, which is straight out of King Lear. And as if that wasn't Shakespearean enough, we even have the Travelling Troupe of Actors, which is very much a mirror of Shakespeare and his life. There's even a writer in the group called Will, just to make it even more obvious. And the actors are trying to set up a theatre, a disc theatre, which is very much a reference to the Globe Theatre, where the Shakespearean company performed many of their plays. Now, some of you might ask, what's the big deal? Like, so the book references Shakespeare. No one was asking for that, right? Was anyone out there being like, oh, I really hope there's more Shakespeare in books? Well, the beauty of it is not just the fact that it's something recognizable. It's actually about finding a story that feels a little predictable. It takes a trope that we think we know and then flips it. Sometimes these story tropes will fit together and they will play out exactly like we think they are. And it feels like destiny, like there's gravity pulling these puzzle pieces to click together. And then other times they just go completely out the window and the totally most unexpected thing happens. And it's all the more enjoyable for being satirized in that sense. Now, let's look at the three key characters we have in our coven, who are the main characters of this story and the greater series. We have Granny Esmeralda Weatherwax, or Esme, or Granny for short. She is a little bit different to how she was in the last book, or at the very least, her role has changed pretty significantly. Last time she was the wise old mentor, bringing on Escarina and trying to teach her that, the ways of witch magic. But she was also opposing Escarina in a way, because Escarina wanted to be a wizard. In many ways, Granny was the conservative voice saying, no, that's not how we do things. This time, she is still cold and stubborn. This time she's not trying to prevent a young girl from breaking the glass ceiling. This time she's actually trying to make things right and bring about justice. So her role is very different in the story. There's a fantastic quote in this book that describes Granny just perfectly. The line is, "She walked quickly through the darkness, with the frank stride of someone who was at least certain that the forest on this damp and windy night contained strange and terrible things. And she was it." I just love that. She's like, I am the scary thing in the darkness. So much confidence.
I am vengeance. I am the night.
Our next member of the coven is Nanny Ogg. Now, Nanny is loud, obnoxious, and boisterous, almost flamboyant. She has a little lute thing that she plays, and she sings, and she likes to make crude jokes all the time. But at the same time, Nanny is a force of nature. She has a strong iron will and an expectation that things are going to be done right. In fact, you don't want to see Nanny and Gretty go head-to-head in a battle of wills, because there will be no survivors. There's basically someone with the Ogg last name in every role they need. So every time they need a blacksmith, there's an Ogg, there's a blacksmith. Whenever they need a guard, there's a Ogg guard. It's just fantastic. And the final member is Magrat. Now, so she's the youngest, the maiden. She's very idealistic. In fact, she has a lot of ideas of what witches should be. Very stereotypical ideas, where she wants the witches to do, to have a coven and to have cauldrons and practice dancing in the moonlight. And it's much to the disappointment of the older witches, who don't buy into any of that stuff. That's not what real witches do at all. But moving on and talking about plot, the plot in this book is actually probably the most complex plot we've seen in the Discworld so far. Normally we have one strong plot line in a book that we focus on, like Death takes on an apprentice, or there's an evil sorcerer lining up, and it's all sort of focused on that thing. But this story has a couple of different plot lines going in different directions, and it sort of juggles them. We are getting to the point where Discworld's hitting that godlike ability of top-tier writing. A lot of the earlier books, people agree, you know, they're okay, but the series gets better. We are almost there. This one's almost perfect. It juggles all those plot lines pretty well. The three main plot lines we have are the witches and their meddling and their schemes and their private lives. We have the Duke and his ambition as he tries to lead the country. And we have the troupe of actors, with the young prince living among them and the characters that we get to know and their journey trying to, you know, successfully be artists on the side. And like all Discworld books, this one's got a lot of deeper themes. The big theme in this one, I feel, is destiny and stories and the power of stories. You see, there's a certain expectation that if a king is usurped and the lost prince is thrown away, that destiny will bring him back to make things right again. There is that expectation that the story will play out as we expected. And I think this is a very valuable thing. People often assume that if a book is fictional, that it has no merit. You know, it's why read a Discworld book when you can read, 10 tips to a successful life or whatever. But people underestimate the power that fiction has, not just to teach us, creativity, empathy for other characters, but it also teaches us in the power of story and the power of belief itself. Destiny is important, see, but people go wrong when they think it controls them. It's the other way around. This is a common theme we see in the Discworld books, the idea that we control destiny, or that our belief itself is what holds power. It's a theme that's explored later again in Small Gods, where the gods gain power from the belief that mortals have in them.
Mighty and powerful gods!
And it's also explored in Hogfather, where Death says very clearly that it is our belief in things that give them power, and even that it's our belief in concepts like justice, mercy, and duty that create those things. Our belief in justice is what makes the world more just. So belief has the power to shape reality and shape our lives. It's a powerful lesson and a good theme that I think we should all try to take on board, that by believing in things, we make it true. We work to make it true.
I do believe in fairies. I do.
Of course, there is another great theme in this book, which is the power of anger. So Granny Weatherwax is an angry, cantankerous character, but we see how much her anger gives her strength. In fact, there's a fantastic line that sums it up really well. It's a big one, so bear with me. Granny Weatherwax was often angry. She considered it one of her strong points. Genuine anger was one of the world's greatest creative forces, but you had to learn how to control it. That didn't mean you let it trickle away. It meant you damned it. Carefully, let it develop a working head. Let it drown whole valleys of the mind, and then, just when the whole structure was about to collapse, open a tiny pipeline at the base, and let the iron-hard stream of wrath power the turbines of revenge. Like, it's such a melodramatic description, but I think it's perfectly accurate. We sometimes believe that anger is such a nasty emotion, and it can be when it's toxic and unhealthy. But anger, when it's healthy, expressed in a controlled way, can be an incredible constructive and creative force for good, to accomplish things. I don't know about you, but if you look at the world today and you're not feeling angry, you're not looking at the world very well. You're not looking at the world with open eyes. And I think anger is a natural human emotion that empowers us to get up and get moving and do good things. But moving on, like all Discworld books, there's plenty of humor in this one. Let me share some of my favorites. There's this fantastic line. This book was written using 100% recycled words, which is technically true. How's this one? Only in our dreams are we free. The rest of the time, we need wages. That is a classic Discworld quote. That's everywhere. I love it. The rest of the time, we need wages. So true. There's a great scene where Death meets a character, and the character says, "I hate cats." Death's face became a little stiffer, if that were possible. The blue globe in his eye sockets flickered red for an instant. "I see," he said. The tone suggested that Death was too good for cat haters. And finally, there's this line, "Things that try to look like things often do look more like things than things." And I love this one. I think it's so very Discworld, because on the surface it just sounds so mind-numbingly stupid, but then it's technically functional, sure, but then it's also kind of wise. Like, things that are fake or untruthful have to look more real than the truth in order to compensate. And that's, in many ways, how you tell the difference between truth and lies, because truth doesn't have to compensate. That's a brilliant line. So Wyrd Sisters is the first of what I consider to be the true Witches series, which accomplishes two great things from this point onwards, where it takes a classic story and filters it through a satirical glaze and looks at it through fresh eyes, and in a way that celebrates it in a much more positive way than I think the Rincewind novels did. But the other thing it does is it explores the historical concept of gender roles, of where women sit in stories. You see, in all the Shakespearean stories, besides famously all the characters being played by men, the witches were always monstrous. They were ugly and they had warts and, nasty faces, and they were monstrous. But Terry takes these monsters out of old story and humanizes them, makes them a force for good, makes them relatable, makes them flawed characters who make mistakes and have stubborn opinions, and yet are also trying to do the right thing. And I think that's the beauty of Discworld's writing, but also books in general, to take what we used to think of as monsters and make them human, to show that they're not so scary, and maybe that it's the people who look beautiful who might be the real monsters in that situation. But that is one of the things I love so much about the Witches books. So I hope you'll give this one a try and continue on with the series. Still, that's all from me today. So I hope you'll read this book and continue with the Witches series. Coming up next is Pyramids, which is a standalone, and Pyramids is a bit of a joke within the Discworld fandom. It's a book that's considered if we had to pick a worst book, it might just be Pyramids. Still, I think it's worth reading, and we can see exactly what didn't quite work about it. But I hope you'll join me for that one. If you want to support the work I do on this channel, I have my own books, The Immortal Investigations, I have my shop, and I have a Patreon. Any of those things will help keep me going. Otherwise, I will see you next time. I hope you enjoy a good book today, and I hope it's a Discworld book. Bye!